Well, hello and welcome to our April in Conversation with webinar. Thank you so much for joining us for this event. My name's Michelle and I'll be your host today. With me, I also have Marlena, and she's going to be helping us with monitoring the chat and sharing any comments as they come in. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. So first, we really want this to be an interactive session, and your participation is highly encouraged and appreciated. So please, with any questions, comments, anything like that you can drop in the chat, go ahead and do that, and Marlena will share those as they come in. Also, if your association grants continuing education credits for this event and you need a certificate, please reach out to me and I'm more than happy to give you one. So with that, I would like to welcome our guest today, my dear friend Connie Putnam with Dakota Lion Sight and Health. And Connie has joined me live from the North Dakota Funeral Directors Convention here in Fargo, where we're both exhibitors. So we're so excited to be together. It's such an honor to have Connie here for this event. So if you haven't had a chance to meet my friend Connie yet, I'll go ahead and just share a little bit about her and then we'll get to chatting. So she began with Dakota Lion Sight and Health back in September 2012 as an on-call recovery technician. This position has allowed her to have the continued opportunity to recover the gifts of sight and health to be shared with those in need. So as a regional donor development manager, she's able to share information about donation opportunities, roles in donation, the organization she works for, and how they contribute to this process by way of hospital in-services, promoting referral opportunities from law enforcement, EMS, and medical examiner coroner team education and credit hours. She also consults with funeral directors in her service area to assist in meeting the needs of the families her organization serves and to maintain positive relationships. Connie is very honored to be able to work with all types of situations and personalities. Her past experiences have enabled her to feel comfortable presenting and discussing donation and really carrying out the mission of Dakota Lion Sight and Health. She is a donor family and truly shares a deeper sense of what donation means and how donation can impact the lives of countless recipients, their families, our partners, and all our communities. So as Connie says, let's help each other out as we really are in this together. So welcome, Connie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here. And, you know, this is Donate Life Month. Yep. And so it's very fitting that we have the opportunity to talk about donation. And maybe, Connie, could you share just a little bit about Donate Life Month and how it got started?
Yeah. Well, donation in general started on the organ side of things. We are an eye and tissue donation organization, but because of the opportunities for donation that have, come up because of technology, because of need, different things like that, and the fact that people are wanting to give anyway when no longer needing things, Donate Life America has created a type of Donate Life Month where we celebrate 1 month to honor those who have donated, as well as their families that have wanted to and agreed with them to give gifts. So April is the month for that, and with that, there's many opportunities for our partners, like hospitals, where we actually share information. They have a blue and green day where you can wear those colors to celebrate. We have a number of different activities that those facilities can do too during this month. So it's basically a celebration of life by way of, organ, eye, and tissue donation.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. And, if any of our attendees have a special donation story they would like to share, we'd sure love to hear that. Feel free, again, to type that into the chat, and Marlena here would be able to share that with us. So we'd love to hear your stories, in honor of this special month. Definitely. We want to hear them. Well, maybe, Connie, you could perhaps share a little bit about Dakota Lion Sight and Health, a little more, how they were started, what their mission's like.
And certainly. So we are one of the lucky ones when it comes to donation, and we have been around now. We're going on 30 years. In October, we're going to celebrate with an open house and that type of thing. We started as an eye donation, an eye bank, and then have progressed into recovering tissues for transplant research and education too. And so we've been lucky to hang around for 30 years. We are headquartered in Sioux Falls. We have offices here in Fargo, in Bismarck, and also Rapid City, South Dakota. We are very honored to be accredited and inspected to be very, very well, how can I say this, very well recommended, or just the fact our reputation for being able to work in ways where we can pass that tissue on, whether it is for transplant or research. So our mission in general is to help enable the restoration of the gifts of sight and health. So like I said before, we're an eye and tissue donation organization. If organs are part of our realm in recovery, that would be by way of research and education also.
Wonderful. And Dakota Lion Sight Health, they do such wonderful work. And I'd really recommend checking out their Facebook page. You guys are pretty active on Facebook, and you can learn more about them and some of the ways they're serving the community. You always have great updates on there. So everyone, please check them out if you have a chance to do that. Well, and I guess my next question, Connie, would be, when it comes to donation, who are some of the greatest allies and partners for donor organizations?
Okay. Well, specifically, I know this is geared, towards like funeral homes and just any of our different partners, which I'll touch base on. But funeral directors, it's really important that we have some kind of partnership with all of you that are in that area. And a lot of that is because you're our last stop no matter what. And so a lot of times we will, interrupt your services with donation. And so our partnership and our communication, which I'll get into here in a little bit, is really imperative to have some kind of positive, even though, the situations that we and mostly you come up on aren't real positive, and you're dealing with a lot of emotion as well, and families and demands and things like that. So we're trying to do what we can to work with you on, that level. Our other partners, obviously, if families and communities weren't accepting of donation, it wouldn't be happening. And the fact that donation in general not only saves lives, but it enhances lives in so many different ways. And me being a donor family, I know, how when things are passed on to someone else and how much that helps them. That's pretty important, and it's a gift that isn't a normal gift by any means, but it is forever changing of people's lives. So we work with hospitals and hospice also, driver's education classes where we're talking to, those kids that are going to get out on the road and drive, and let them know that, hey, this is one thing that is out there that isn't talked about every day, but we do kind of give them donation 101 and ask them to share with their families too, and make decisions about whether or not they want to be a donor. I also work directly with medical examiners, coroners, law enforcement, EMS teams for those situations where anything outside of a hospital where a death occurs, and they're needing that extra support, we're needing their support, and we're needing to all work together when it comes to donation. So those partnerships are extremely important too. And then donation industry partners where, just an example, Mayo Clinic, we've actually recovered donor brain from Alzheimer patients that went to Mayo Clinic for research. So those industry partners like Mayo Clinic, and we have NDRI for different research types of projects, and that is really important too, because you never know if on the research end of things, what kind of answers they could find and how many people that could help in the long run. So, yeah.
Oh, well, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know even for funeral directors who are maybe somewhat seasoned, there's still a lot of mystery, if you will, surrounding donation.
Yeah.
So maybe you could share a little bit, is a full reconstruction always possible? Can the donor always be viewed? How much time is there? Things like that, just to, demystify the donation experience, if you will.
Definitely. We're not the only eye and tissue bank out there. And we don't, like I said, on the organ side of things, that's not necessarily in our realm. The situation where we stand is there should absolutely be no problem with any kind of viewing. So if that family is wanting, the viewing so they can say goodbye, so they can have closure, and they're asking you to provide that service to them as funeral directors, it can be a lot of pressure. And so with donation taking place and us interrupting that process, we're doing what we can. And like I said, I'll get into that in just a little bit here, but we're doing what we can to work with you on that part of it. So there can be that open casket viewing that can, help them out with saying goodbye. And especially, unfortunately, in these times of COVID where, people don't get to die with family, they're dying alone, and they need that kind of closure just to be able to be with their family member or their loved one, their friend, whoever it is. So we're doing what we can to help you make that happen too. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And now my understanding is for eye and tissue, do you have 12 hours? How many hours is it you have for the procurement? How quick is it?
Well, hopefully, as soon as possible after someone passes, we can get information, get a referral, different things like that. A lot of that has to do with donor designation, if they are actually designated on their ID or driver's license. That is an open door to the possibility of donation. Timing is always really important because, as you know, as funeral directors, that the longer things wait before you can do any kind of body prep or anything like that, the worse things can be as far as outcomes go, and especially if there is going to be a viewing. So we want hopefully to be able to recover within 12 hours. A lot of it has to do with environment and just different things like that. Hopefully we're getting a call in a timely manner where we can start tackling things like their medical records and finding out what's going on with prior history and what has happened with that donor up until that point, including cause of death. So there's a number of factors there that we have to look at in order to make donation happen, and as well as respect the time limits and the things that funeral directors have on their plate to deal with too. So and part of that has to do with reconstruction, it has to do with restoration. It's just really important that if we are looking at donation for that person, that they are treated with the utmost respect. The care, everything is really important that takes place prior to passing them on for final restoration with funeral directors. So, yeah.
Excellent.
I've got a couple questions come through.
Sure.
The first question is, how often do people choose to become donors?
That's really tough, only because there's so many different opportunities to check the box, so to speak. And so whether it's when they renew their driver's license, or even these kids that are taking driver's ed that are going to actually get that license for the first time too, there's that question that's on the application for your driver's license, whether you're renewing or brand new. There is websites, and that includes our website too, where you can go on, and if you want to register to be a donor, you can just tell the family, your own family, hey, I do want to be a donor. I'm not going to mark it anywhere, anything like that. But the family, can pass that on if something does happen. So as far as how many times they choose or whatever, that's hard to say. I can tell you that basically because our two biggest areas of service are South Dakota and North Dakota, it's pretty even as far as those that are registered to be a donor, whether it is on their ID or their driver's license. And that's about right now 70 to 78%, somewhere in there, that people are actually registered donors. And so we look at that specifically. Donor designation is really important. As far as if it is on that ID or driver's license, because that's a legal document. And so we want to, and we're actually obligated to respect that wish because of that particular situation. We also work with the families on, we have to know that history. We have to know what's going on with that potential donor too. And things may turn out that they can't be a donor. Not everybody can be always. But there is some things that we need to look at just because for a donation. So hopefully I answered that.
Yeah, that was a great answer. So the second question was, do donor families ever have the opportunity to meet the recipients?
Yes, they do. What's really cool is we have, and I think I might have put this, maybe not in the PowerPoint, but we actually have situations where, and trying to keep up with HIPAA and privacy, things like that, where we can share some information, like those that had a loved one die and they donate, say corneas and maybe some tissue or something like that, we are able to tell the families, you know, where those corneas go, not specific person where they go, but the area. And also with the tissue too, like different tissues, kind of the areas of where they go. And we give those recipients the option to approach that donor family if they want. And then we are able to bring them together in situations where we have donor events, where we're honoring the donor families and also honoring recipients and just having them meet each other. Just by way of working things around HIPAA and just the need for the donor family and the recipient to want to connect with each other. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. That must be a very special moment. Have you ever been there when they get to meet? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Definitely. We had, I might even tear up on this,
Oh.
but we had a situation where we had a donor event. It was actually here in North Dakota where a lady she was actually one of our speakers and she was a cornea recipient. And she had gotten up and spoke on donations behalf and just really on her gratitude for being able to receive the gift of sight. And so she got up and spoke and said, you know, I'm here today to let you know that I saw the sunrise this morning, I saw the sunset last night. And she said, but more importantly, I'm here because of someone. And then she proceeded to say that I'm here because of Jack. And this is Jack's cornea, and I am able to see, and I'm able to meet Jack's family and thank them. And it was just a wonderful situation. I know I'm being real brief about it because I don't want to, you know, overstep anything, but what a wonderful connection that they were able to make with each other. So, and Jack lives on. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing. And oh, that's wonderful. Well, one thing I would like to throw out there just to those, you know, embalmers perhaps who are in the audience. Of course, we want to best serve families, you know, make sure the donor's family has the best viewing experience possible. And if you have any special tips that you would like to share, we would love to hear them just so we can pass those along. So again, feel free to drop those in the chat, but that's something we would love to share. We always want to help the donor families, you know, have the best viewing experience. And I guess kind of my next question has to do with, you know, what are some of the uses for donated tissue? You know, I mean, cornea donation, of course, but what do you do with donated tissue?
Right. Well, on this particular screen, what you're seeing here is the tissues that are donated, not only for transplant, but at the bottom there I have research tissue. And then over to on the side, I have just some options as far as like what happens with the tissue and how it helps. And so things like skin, tendon, ligaments, vascular, really help patients that are facing life-threatening burns, trauma, and diseases of the skin, especially with the skin side of things. And skin has actually become something that is more of a common type of donation than it has been in the past, only because of technology and how it can be processed and shared with other people, so they don't have to compromise any other part of their own body in order to fight whatever it is that they're fighting. So that's probably, corneas are actually the most common donation because of many reasons that I'll talk about. And bone is usually like the second most common, even though once again, I want to reiterate, it did all start with organ tissue or organ donation for transplant. And just because of how technology has been, coming up a little bit more in, just their own, I don't know, growth of expertise and things like that, it's really helped other options for donations. So your tendons, your ligaments, your vascular tissues, those athletes with injuries or whatever, connective tissues, restore mobility to military men and women who have been injured in combat, where, functionality with certain, even body parts or whatever is needed because they were in combat. So we're helping that way. Heart valves are something that, if you're wondering about age groups or anything like that, that we work with, just young children as young as 2 are probably our cutoff for like youth. A lot of that is because what we do, there isn't a lot of things on that any younger than 2 that are advanced enough for any kind of transplant on our realm. But heart valves is huge. And that's something that is very, very helpful to many people with, just those kind of problems cardiovascularly. So yeah. And then the research tissue, finding palliative measures, answers, cures to any kind of dysfunction and disease that could potentially help thousands of people. I mentioned that Alzheimer's brain, and wow, it'd be awesome. I don't know that there's a cure anytime soon, but as far as helping people out, we've recovered cancerous tissue that they're doing testing on as well. And just other things that if there's any kind of certain studies going on in the world today with whatever, we're doing recoveries of certain tissues that way too. So
wow. And is the success of tissue donation, what would be the success rate, for transplantable tissue? Any idea on that?
Well, like your tendons, your ligaments, and your bone. Bone is very, very successful. Only because I'm gonna use the word bleached instead of processed. But the way it is processed from from a donor to recipient, the steps that are taken in between, bone is very, very accepted in our systems. And so there's actually over 1 million surgical procedures a year that use bone tissue. Wow. And so because the success rate is so needed, and they're not having to take, once again, bone from that same person that compromises a certain area, these donors are being very gracious with sharing the bone that they can give in order to help that healing. So bone is very, very successful. Skin is, it's successful, but a lot of it has to do with the grafting and what kind of trauma that person is suffering at the time that's receiving it too. So there's a lot of medical factors that I don't know about, as other than I just know there's a lot of factors that affect any kind of, recipient situation when they're, taking on some other tissue and or, prosthetic even. So just a number of things, but on the tissue side of things, the success rate usually is fairly high, and it's a lot more common than even the organ donation because of, looking at those anti-rejection meds and the medical side of it again. So, yeah.
And is tissue and corneas tested for COVID, for example, or other diseases?
We do some testing for that. The nice thing about where we're at with donation is those that are passing in hospitals, we're working diligently with those hospital staff, especially if they've done any testing. I mean, there's a reason why that person ended up there in the first place. And so there could have been symptoms, there could have been a number of things. And our organization has been extremely lucky enough to, out of all the recoveries that we've done in the past year with this pandemic, to have only 2 donors come back positive for COVID. And so we're asking the right questions, we're doing the right testing, and we're not passing that tissue on unless we know for sure. And so, yeah, it's just really important that, you know, we pay attention to all the aspects that are going on in this world today. So.
We have a question and a comment. The comment is, I donated both of my children's placentas and cords when they were born. I believe some stem cells were used as well as the placental tissue for burn victims for graft site healing.
Wow.
Yeah, that is wonderful. We actually are starting a new program for birth tissue. So what's really awesome about the birth tissue side of things is, you know, we don't necessarily have to lose a loved one to be able to pass that tissue on. And so we're working on a hardcore program right now, and we haven't launched anything yet. We're just seeing how hospitals are reacting to what we want to do and their part in it for this partnership, and then offering, you know, the good side of why we'd be recovering that tissue in order to really launch this program. So we would be the only one in the Dakotas to be able to do this, and we're hoping to have that opened up fairly soon.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so thank you to that mom who donated that tissue of her children for birth.
Absolutely. And then question, how is the tissue transported, specifically say skin?
We had that question early this morning at the conference. Obviously, we have to do something to keep it cool, to slow any kind of decomp down or anything like that. And depending on who is doing the actual processing, that's our partner that's doing that, you know, we would have to package it, we have to seal it airtight, or it might be put in a type of media for preservation too. So just it's really up to whoever it is that we're partnering with. It's going to process that skin to be used for whatever reason. So I don't have any specifics other than, you know, it's really, when we recover it, we're following instructions for whatever it's being used for.
And I think, didn't we have someone ask earlier, what about tattooed skin? Or,
oh, yeah.
So, I mean, would you take skin that's been tattooed?
Yeah, yeah, we would not. I usually make kind of a joke about that because tattoos, you know, they're usually personal, and it's actually considered kind of a, oh, what would you call it? Not real healthy skin if somebody did, you know, get a tattoo. But if it says I love Bob on there, you know, we probably don't want to pass that on to somebody who doesn't necessarily love Bob. And I know that's kind of putting some humor into it in such a serious situation. But basically, tattooed skin is considered contaminated, so we're not going to do that. Or skin that has any kind of like surgical scars, or if there is some scarring, some possible, maybe some melanomas or like moles or things like that, we're not going to recover that skin either. So.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. Perfect. And so we've had a chance to talk about the tissue donation. So, next we can kind of touch on cornea donation. My question would be, what can donated corneas be used for other than the gift of sight? And what kind of diseases cause blindness that can be cured with cornea donation?
Okay. All right. Well, corneas being like the most common donation, a lot of that has to do with the fact that our corneas, there's very little blood flow in the corneas. And when we recover them, we don't have to worry about whether or not somebody, that donor themselves wore glasses, or what color their skin is, or what their blood type, anything like that. Corneas are extremely universal, and the transplant rate, as you can see on the screen, is extremely high. And that's that lack of blood flow, that lack of worrying about, anything being passed on. The reason why people would need a cornea transplant are a number of diseases like Fuchs dystrophy or cornea, where if you've seen someone that their eyes it looks almost like a bulging in the eye, it comes to a point, and sometimes that's thyroid too, but the keratoconus is a very painful disease. Where it will actually destroy the corneal cells, and they need to be replaced. There's herpes in the eye, where you would need a cornea transplant as well. That Fuchs dystrophy, which is it can be passed down in your family line. Very painful disease too, where you end up just having blurry sight, eventually going to darkness. It's nothing inside the eye at all, it's the cornea. And so that's what makes that transplant a hopefully successful procedure and a priceless donation, because that person couldn't see prior to that. So it's just really awesome to be able to have, 2 corneas that are recovered, help 2 people. If both eyes are infected, say with some sort of disease or infection or something like that, a corneal transplant is only done on one eye at a time. So somebody who's a double cornea recipient would be a recipient from 2 actual donors rather than just one. And a lot of that is your healing time, which is fairly quick, but they don't want to do 2 surgeries at once. So
I see. So since there's not a whole lot of blood flow to the eye, if someone had like cancer, I mean, that wouldn't disqualify them from being a donor, or is that correct?
Right. That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. A person, say, a female who had breast cancer and it even metastasized, aging and that type of thing might be a factor, but other than that, no, there's no reason why she couldn't be a cornea donor.
Wow, so almost anyone could be a cornea donor, is that correct?
Yeah, corneas are, like I said, they're amazing. There's more cornea donation than any other.
Wow.
Yep.
That's wonderful. And, how can a funeral home best work with their donor organization? You're there to serve them, of course, but what can they do to help serve you as well and make your job easier?
So some of the things that I wanted to talk about just a little more specifically, communication is definitely the key. And I know that with all of us everywhere in every aspect of our lives. And part of our process at Dakota Lion Sight and Health that we are proud of as far as donation goes is we are doing our best to touch base with funeral directors when donation is going to happen. There's always, some different areas prior to a referral coming to us that we might have to wait on, or that we aren't even aware of, or whatever. So timeliness obviously is part of that communication. And with what you are going to have to do after donation takes place, or even if there's been a lot of time where there hasn't necessarily been a referral yet, or there is a referral and we're trying to research whether or not this person can even, be a donor. We're doing what we can with just, trying to work that out as fast as possible so we can let you know. And I think probably the best thing that we could ask of you when it comes to communication is, if a lot of times you'll end up at a hospital to do a removal and nobody said anything about donation. You got a phone call, come and, please, take this person into your care, and you get there and there's this big waiting thing. And how frustrating is that when it's like 2 or 3 in the morning? And so what I would ask when you get that call, whether it's from hospital staff or even the family, because we might not have talked to the family yet either about that person, whether they're a designated donor, whether they talk to their family about donation, whatever, they've made a choice for you to serve them, but they haven't necessarily talked about donation yet. And so I would say to you too, communicate with the hospital or even call us and say, hey, listen, we're to the understanding that, there's a potential donor, or there's someone at the hospital before I even leave, my office. Is that going to happen, or would you let me know? So save yourself a trip, save yourself a hassle, a middle of the night stuff, and ask that question too, especially if you haven't heard from us or any other agency that you might be working with. So it's just really important. So that referral source is huge to you, just to find out. And then along with the communication, I guess I'll just keep going.
Please do. This is wonderful. I'm learning so much. Thank you, Connie.
Yeah, no problem. But I mean, that ruling out all of that we're trying to do, we're trying to move forward with donation is going to take time. So if you have questions on, hey, where are you guys at with this or whatever, you're welcome to call me directly and I will do what I can to find answers. But we have an 800 number too that you can call, where you're going to be talking to our coordinator, who actually is the one who's trying to set up all of the factors with donation or not, or even getting to you. So we want to be as open and transparent as possible with communicating with you. So it's really important that, we have those lines that we can go back and forth with stuff, and we're here to help out where we can. Also, when it comes to donation, we actually will work with you where there's a concern about the actual viewing for the family. And when it comes to skin donation, or when it comes to certain other, say we're recovering maybe spinal column and spinal fluid for research. I mean, if things like that are a factor with what you're trying to provide for the family and present to the family, please let us know that, because donation can take place and it isn't about, doing any kind of recovery with as many body parts as possible. We're here to respect that donor, that family, and the work that you need to do too. So I can tell you that those, funerals where we've recovered corneas and say, full long bone, whether it's both arm, and leg, or just leg or whatever, that's not going to interfere with the viewing. So we're doing what we can in our due diligence to, help you make that presentation too. I can't imagine the pressure that you feel sometimes. I know I feel pressure. I'm not even doing recoveries anymore. And when I know what we're recovering and there might be a viewing, it's like, okay, come on, we want to get this right too. So please share with us your concerns and also what you're grateful for too. But I mean, we want to hear from you what would be helpful to you. So.
Now, let's say someone's outside of your service area. We might have people on here that are outside of the Dakotas. And let's say they don't have a good working relationship with their organization. They don't even know who their organization is. How could they get information, find their organization? Any suggestions?
Right. A lot of that will have to do with, especially if that person passes in the hospital. donation organizations have, and it's contracts, I'm just gonna put it out there with the hospitals.
Okay.
And so the hospital is going to be able to tell you who their donation partners are and who they're serving as well. So especially if you're in that area or the same state usually as that hospital, then that would be your answer. There is some states that have more than one entity with their partners, so find that out too. And the best thing to do is, give them a call and say, hey, listen, I don't know if you would be the one representing donation in this particular case, but ask questions. It can't hurt. There is absolutely no stupid questions, like, especially if there is possibility of donation, you need to know. Because like I said, they're your final stop and you have a job to do and a family to serve as well. So yeah, open that communication, open.
Absolutely. And do we have anything coming through in the chat perhaps, Marlena?
Yes, sorry, I just didn't want to cut anybody off. Question. So it says, I am uncertain how the process works in the USA. In England, many people will take out a prepayment plan when they plan the funeral with the funeral director, contributing towards a policy that will cover the cost of the funeral before they die. If the system is the same in the US, is that the best time to discuss donation and obtain a possible commitment to donation well ahead of time? Or are there ethical or practical considerations that may impact an early decision?
Okay, great question.
Absolutely.
Things that none of us think about on a daily basis, and especially when we're young and think we're, gonna live forever. We're not necessarily making end of life decisions. As funeral directors, I would say make it part of your program. Make it part of what you're doing to serve your families, your community, or whatever, because that may come up at some point. Do we know that we're going to be able to be a donor when our life is completely over? Those that sign up for donation hope so, and those that don't, it really probably doesn't matter. But I will tell you that there's certain decisions that we make in life that will negate that factor too. So and just a quick example, I know that in our area, anyone who dies in a prison situation or a jail, it cannot be a donor. And there's a number of reasons for that, but they may have been a designated donor and it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So thinking ahead when it comes to what you're offering families or whatever, number one, there should be absolutely no cost to those families. On our part, there shouldn't be any cost to those families for any kind of donation taking place. We're here to help the funeral homes with that. If there's extra time, even sometimes supplies, whatever it is that's needed on those people that come in from us, where donation has taken place. And so what we're doing is asking questions like, what do you need from us as far as any kind of closure? And a lot of that might be, stitching, or are you needing prosthetics? Are you needing different things like that? And so because of those extra things, that may be something that is taken into consideration with conversations with your donation agencies, as well as what's going on with your families. So donation might happen when that person dies, or it might not. But I would ask you, to hopefully be open to that possibility when you are, writing up plans with families. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully I got that answered. If not, you can email me, text me.
That was an excellent question, though. Thank you so much for asking. Do we have any other ones before we almost come to a conclusion, Marlena?
That was the last question. I mean, we did have a comment. Thank you for all you do. I have worked with organizations such as yourself and have a lot of respect for what you do. Thank you for providing such a necessary service.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I tell you what, when it comes to funerals and trying to serve families and the pressure that, funeral directors are under, like I said, I can't imagine. So, I will echo and return that sentiment because end of life situations and all of the things that surround end of life, and when we lose someone that we love, and there's none of us that are going to get out of this life without losing someone, the job and the services that you provide are so extremely important. So thank you for what you do as well. Let's work this out together. Communicate with your donation agencies, find out what they're doing, and ask them to help you, and they will ask you to help them as well. So let's work it out.
Definitely. Well, I guess my kind of final thought would be, okay, Connie, how many people can benefit from one donor? Or, sorry, how many recipients can benefit from one donor?
Right. Well, on the screen, as you see, potential to help over 400 people. It just depends on what actually is recovered and the possibilities having to do with what's needed for different tissues, what's needed on the organ side of things, because this includes organs as well. And it's pretty amazing how we can be very helpful to people if we are designated donors and can donate depending on choices in our lives. And so it's awesome that we can give back or pay it forward, as I kind of put it, if that's a possibility. And if there is accepting organizations out there like funeral directors and donation organizations that can help make that happen.
Wonderful. And if you would like to get in touch with Connie, we do have her information here. She's always happy to hear from you. I do know that I've had people ask, I was a funeral director prior to working for Placenta, but they're like, what can our funeral home do to honor donor families? So I'd like to ask you that, but I'd also like those in attendance to perhaps drop some ideas in the chat. If there's anything you would like to share about how your funeral home honors donor families, we would love to hear it. But Connie, what are some suggestions you have?
So since you are serving that family and they made the choice, or that deceased made that choice to be a donor, and donation takes place, if you are part of writing obituaries and things like that, there may be something that can be added to the obituary to help honor that family, since you are putting together the service for them. We have wonderful funeral homes, both in South Dakota and North Dakota, that actually raise the Donate Life flag, which I actually have some of those too. So if that's something that any of you would want, you're willing to request that from me, and I will get you a Donate Life flag to fly during a service for that. Donate Life Month, we touch base with our funeral directors on that too, and let them know that, hey, that's what's going on this month. We will provide different little packages for the service itself, having to do with like Donate Life bracelets, pens, just information on donation. And it's really up to the family and the funeral home to put that out there or not. There's many, many funerals that take place where nobody actually knows that person is a donor other than the funeral home, as well as the family, and nobody really talks about it. So it's really a personal thing. It's up to you and the family to decide whether or not that's something you want to bring about to the public. But it is a quite an honor for that person who was a donor, and it's very respectful for the family too. And thank you for respecting donation by recognizing it, if that's what you want to do.
Wonderful. Well, I see one little comment in the chat about how in their state, it looks like their donor organization gives out little like beads, and the families call them love stones. And they're like heart-shaped beads, it looks like. And, it can stay with the person during cremation or burial. It can be given to the family. A little bit of both is just a way to honor the gift. I think I'm seeing that they give 1 stone per gift.
Oh, that's
so
neat.
I know what a wonderful way. And the family family, kind of gives
Yeah.
them that little keepsake connection.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know that little trinkets or whatever, you can, go on different sites and just find little things that honor donation that, if families are interested or whatever, that might be something that as funeral directors you share with the families you serve as part of your service. Hey, we have this because, your loved one was a donor. Is this something that you want to consider, giving out or as part of the service? So that's wonderful. We should celebrate the lives of the people that we lost, and I think it's really important that we don't forget them. So.
Absolutely. Well, are there any final questions or comments? I know we've gone a bit over on time, but this has just been such a wonderful time together. Anything coming through, Marlena, that we should address?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, I would just like to thank everyone for being here. Connie, do you have any final closing thoughts you would like to end with? Or
just like I said before, thank you for your service to the families, the communities. Thank you for working with us, donation agencies, and the industries themselves. Appreciate what you do so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, we hope you will join us next month for our In Conversation With. But again, I'd like to give such a special thank you to Connie for giving us her time today, and a special thank you to everyone who joined us. So thank you, and we will see you next month.